It was a typical Monday morning at my startup office in downtown Austin. The familiar sounds of keyboard clicks, coffee brewing, and my team discussing user analytics filled the air around me. I was 32, finally feeling like I had found my rhythm as an entrepreneur. My phone buzzed on my desk, and when I saw Dad flash across the screen, I felt that warm flutter you get when someone you love reaches out. William Harrison rarely texted during business hours, so this felt special. I opened the message with a smile, expecting maybe a proud father checking in on his son's tech company. Instead, the words on my screen made my blood run cold. I disown you. Talk to my lawyer. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will show you how one text message changed everything between my father and me forever. And trust me, you will not believe what I discovered when I dug deeper into why he sent it. To understand how devastating that text was, you need to know about the relationship my father and I used to have. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut, I was the apple of William Harrison's eye. My dad built Harrison and Associates from nothing into one of the most respected real estate development companies on the East Coast. Every Sunday, he would take me to the Riverside Country Club, where he taught me golf on the pristine greens overlooking Long Island Sound. Those were magical afternoons. Just the two of us with him sharing stories about business deals while I tried to perfect my swing. Our family vacations were legendary. We would spend Christmas in Aspen staying at the St. Regis, skiing the mountain together while Mom preferred the spa. Summer meant Martha's Vineyard, where Dad would rent a 40-foot yacht and we would sail around Nantucket Sound. He loved showing me off to his business associates. "This is my son Randall," he would say with genuine pride. "Straight-A student captain of his lacrosse team, and someday he is going to run Harrison and Associates better than his old man ever could." That was always the plan. From the time I could walk, Dad made it clear that I was being groomed to take over the family business. He would bring me to construction sites on weekends, letting me wear a tiny hard hat while he explained how real estate development worked. "See that empty lot, son? In 2 years, there will be a shopping center there that will generate income for decades. That is real business, Randall. That is building something that lasts." When I got into Harvard Business School, Dad threw a party at the country club that lasted until 2 in the morning. He hired a photographer to capture every moment, and for weeks afterward he carried around pictures of me in my Harvard sweatshirt, showing them to anyone who would look. My boy got into Harvard Business School, he would beam. Always knew he had it in him. I graduated summa cum laude with a focus on entrepreneurship and innovation, but even then, Dad's vision never wavered. The day after my graduation ceremony, he had business cards printed for me. Randall Harrison, Vice President of Development, Harrison and Associates. He presented them to me over dinner at our favorite steakhouse in Manhattan, sliding the elegant cream-colored cards across the white tablecloth, like he was presenting me with the keys to the kingdom. But somewhere during my time at Harvard, something had shifted inside me. I became fascinated by technology companies, by the idea of building something completely new rather than just continuing what already existed. I started reading about entrepreneurs who created billion-dollar companies from their dorm rooms, who disrupted entire industries with nothing but an idea and determination. The first crack in our perfect father-son relationship appeared when I told him I wanted to spend a year working at a tech startup before joining the family business. "Why would you want to waste your Harvard education on some risky tech nonsense?" he asked, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. "You have a guaranteed future with Harrison and Associates. These tech companies, they come and go like fashion trends. Real estate is forever, son." But I was determined. I had already accepted a position at a small fintech startup in Boston, and despite his disapproval, I moved forward with my plan. That decision planted the first seed of disappointment in my father's eyes, though at the time I believed it was just temporary. I thought once I got this entrepreneurial bug out of my system, I would return home and everything would go back to normal. I had no idea how wrong I was. After 18 months at the Boston startup, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of returning to Harrison and Associates as planned, I decided to launch my own company. I had identified a gap in the personal finance market and developed an idea for an app called FinanceFlow that would help young professionals manage their money more effectively. When I called Dad to share my excitement about my new venture, the silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "When you are done playing games, The real business is waiting for you, Randall. That conversation set the tone for the next 2 years. Our weekly phone calls became shorter and more strained. Dad stopped asking about my work altogether, changing the subject whenever I tried to share updates about FinanceFlow. When I mentioned that we had reached our first 1,000 users, he simply said, "That is nice, son. How is your mother?" When I told him about our first revenue milestone, he cut me off mid-sentence. "Speaking of money, do you need anything? Because you know there is a corner office with your name on it whenever you decide to come home." The financial pressure was intense. Starting a tech company required significant upfront investment, and I was burning through my savings faster than I anticipated. I had to make the painful decision to move from my nice apartment in Cambridge to a studio above a pizza shop in Somerville. My wardrobe went from business casual to whatever was clean and cost less than $20. During one particularly difficult month when I had to choose between paying my rent and keeping our servers running, I swallowed my pride and called Dad. "I could use some financial support for the company," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course, he replied immediately, and for a moment, relief washed over me. Then he continued, "I will transfer $50,000 to your account today on one condition. You shut down this app nonsense and come work for Harrison and Associates. Think of it as a signing bonus." The offer hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or burn. "Dad, I appreciate it, but I cannot accept money with those strings attached. I believe in what I am building." His laugh was sharp and bitter. "You believe in an app? Randall, I am offering you a multi-million-dollar company that I spent my entire life building, and you are choosing some computer program over your family legacy." That conversation ended with both of us hanging up, frustrated, but it was nothing compared to the disaster that unfolded 3 months later at our annual family Christmas dinner. The entire Harrison clan was gathered around the dining room table. My parents, my Aunt Sarah, and Uncle Robert, my cousins Jennifer and Michael, and my grandmother Eleanor, who was 91 and sharp as a tack. Grandmother Eleanor had always been particularly interested in my career, so naturally she asked about FinanceFlow. As I was explaining how we had grown to 15,000 users, Dad interrupted, "Mother, please do not encourage this fantasy. Randall is wasting his Harvard education and his potential on childish dreams. It is time he grew up and joined the real world." The entire table went silent. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. "Childish dreams." I repeated, my voice louder than I intended. "Dad, I am building something that actually helps people. We have users sending us messages every day saying our app helped them pay off debt and save for their futures." "And how much money are you making from these grateful users?" he shot back. "Because last I checked, you are living above a pizza shop and driving a car that is older than some of our interns." The fight escalated from there, with voices raised and old grievances aired in front of the entire family. My mother tried desperately to mediate, but Dad and I were beyond hearing anyone else. Finally, I stood up from the table and said, "You know what, Dad, I do not need your approval or your money. I am going to make this work, and when I do, I hope you remember this conversation." I left that Christmas dinner feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. My own father had humiliated me in front of our entire family, dismissing my work as childish fantasies. But instead of discouraging me, his words lit a fire inside me. I was going to prove him wrong no matter what it took. Over the next 6 months, I poured every ounce of energy I had into FinanceFlow. I worked 18-hour days, lived on ramen noodles and determination, and slowly but surely, our user base began to grow exponentially. By March of my third year as an entrepreneur, FinanceFlow was finally gaining real traction. We hit 10,000 active users, and TechCrunch wrote a small feature about us as one of the rising stars in personal finance technology. I was so excited about the article that I actually forwarded it to Dad, hoping this external validation might help him see that my work was legitimate. His response was a single line: "It is just beginner's luck, Randall. Real business is different." But bigger things were happening behind the scenes. Marcus Goldman from Elevation Ventures, a respected venture capital firm in San Francisco, reached out after reading about us. He flew to Austin specifically to meet with me, and after a 3-hour presentation at a coffee shop downtown, he said, the magic words every entrepreneur dreams of hearing: "We want to invest." The term sheet he proposed was beyond my wildest expectations: $2 million in Series A funding, in exchange for 20% equity. It would allow me to hire a proper development team, invest in marketing, and finally pay myself a real salary. I was so excited I could barely sleep for 3 days. Marcus said he would need 2 weeks to finalize the paperwork with his partners, but he assured me it was just a formality. This is exactly the kind of company Elevation wants in our portfolio, he told me as we shook hands outside the coffee shop. You have built something special here, Randall. I was walking on air. Finally, I would have the resources to scale FinanceFlow into the company I had always envisioned. More importantly, I would have proof that my father was wrong about my childish dreams. But 2 weeks later, Marcus called with devastating news. Randall, I am really sorry, but we have decided not to move forward with the investment. The partners had some concerns about the competitive landscape that we had not fully considered initially. I was crushed, but I accepted his explanation. Venture capital was notoriously fickle, and plenty of great companies had been turned down by investors who later regretted their decision. I thanked Marcus for his time and started reaching out to other potential investors. 3 months later, I was having drinks with Jake Morrison, an old Harvard classmate who worked at a competing VC firm in Boston. I mentioned the Elevation Ventures situation in passing, and Jake's reaction was strange. He got very quiet and asked, "Wait, did you say Marcus Goldman from Elevation, and your last name is Harrison?" "Yes." Why, Jake looked uncomfortable, glancing around the bar before leaning closer. "Randall, I probably should not tell you this, but Marcus mentioned your deal to me at a conference last month. He said he had been ready to invest until he got a call from someone claiming to be your father, warning him that you were unstable and that your family was considering legal action to stop you from using the Harrison name for business purposes." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" "According to Marcus, this person said you had a history of grandiose delusions and that your family was embarrassed by your behavior. They apparently convinced him that investing in your company would be a huge liability." I sat there stunned, unable to process what I was hearing. My own father had sabotaged my investment deal. He had not just refused to support my dreams, he had actively worked to destroy them. That night I called Dad directly. "Did you contact Marcus Goldman at Elevation Ventures?" I asked without preamble. There was a long pause before he answered. "Yes, I did." "How could you do that to me, Randall? I was protecting you from making a huge mistake. These venture capital people, they would have taken your company away from you eventually. I saved you from getting in over your head. You do not get to make that decision for me," I shouted into the phone. "That was my choice, my company, my future, and you destroyed it. I am your father," he said, his voice cold and final. "It is my job to protect you even from yourself." I hung up on him that night and did not speak to him again for 8 months. The betrayal cut deeper than any argument we had ever had. This was not just disapproval or disappointment. This was active sabotage. My own father had contacted a potential investor and lied about me to ensure my failure. Without the Elevation funding, FinanceFlow struggled to stay afloat. I had to let go of 2 of my 3 employees and move to an even smaller office space. Every day felt like a battle for survival, and the weight of my father's betrayal made it exponentially harder to find the motivation to keep going. My mother called regularly, begging me to reconcile with Dad. "He loves you, Randall," she would say through tears. "He just wants what is best for you. Can you not see past your pride and forgive him?" But it was not about pride anymore. It was about respect, about the fundamental right to make my own choices and live with the consequences. My father had crossed a line that I was not sure could ever be uncrossed. Little did I know the worst was yet to come. The text message arrived on a Wednesday morning in November. I was sitting in my cramped office, desperately trying to figure out how to make payroll for my remaining employee when my phone buzzed. Seeing Dad on the screen, my first instinct was hope. Maybe he was finally ready to apologize. Maybe 8 months of silence had helped him understand how badly he had hurt me. Instead, I read the most devastating 12 words I had ever received: "I disown you. Talk to my lawyer." My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen. This could not be real. People did not actually disown their children over career disagreements, did they? I read the message 3 more times, hoping the words would somehow change, but they remained the same, cold and final. I immediately called my mother, but she was crying too hard to speak coherently at first. Finally, between sobs, she managed to explain what had happened. Your father went to see Richard Blackstone yesterday, she said, referring to the family's longtime attorney. He had legal papers drawn up to remove you from his will and from any future inheritance from the family trust. But why now, I asked, still struggling to understand. We have not even spoken in months. Oh, honey, Mom said, her voice breaking again. He heard something that made him believe you were planning to sue him. Sue him for what? For your share of Harrison and Associates. Someone told him you were working with lawyers to force him to give you part of the company to fund your startup. The accusation was so absurd it took me a moment to process it. Mom, you know I would never do that. I have never even considered anything like that. I know, sweetheart. I know. But your father was so angry, so hurt by the idea that his own son would take legal action against him. Richard Blackstone tried to talk him out of it, told him to wait and verify the information first, but your father insisted. He signed the papers yesterday afternoon. As Mom continued talking, the picture became clearer. Thomas Whitfield, one of Dad's biggest competitors in the Connecticut real estate market, had apparently called him with a fabricated story about overhearing my legal strategy at some business networking event. Whitfield and Dad had been rivals for decades, competing for the same development deals and clients. He had found the perfect way to strike at Dad's most vulnerable spot, his relationship with me. The most painful part was that Dad had believed it so easily. After 32 years as my father, after knowing me my entire life, he had accepted without question that I was capable of suing him for money. The years of disappointment and conflict had eroded his trust in me so completely that this lie seemed plausible to him. I sat in my office for hours after that phone call, staring at his text message and trying to decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to call him immediately to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, to beg him to reconsider. Another part of me wanted to write a long, detailed message explaining exactly how much he had hurt me and how wrong he was. But in the end, I did something that surprised even me. I typed a single word, okay. That was it. No explanation, no pleading, no anger, just acceptance. Because in that moment I realized something crucial. I was done seeking my father's approval. I was done trying to prove myself to someone who would believe the worst about me, without even asking for my side of the story. If he wanted to disown me based on lies from his business rival, then maybe it was time for me to truly become independent. But I was not going to just accept defeat quietly. I had one card left to play, and it was time to use it. My grandfather, Dad's father, had set up a trust fund for me when I was born. It was supposed to be for educational purposes and establishing myself in business according to the original documents. The fund contained $500,000, and while I had always assumed I would need Dad's permission to access it, a review of the legal paperwork revealed that I could withdraw the entire amount once I turned 30. I had been 32 for 8 months. The next morning, I walked into Bridgeport National Bank and requested a complete withdrawal of the Harrison Family Educational Trust. The banker, who had known our family for years, seemed surprised but processed the paperwork without question. By noon, I had $500,000 in my business account and a plan for how to use every penny of it. If Dad wanted to disown me, fine. I would show him exactly what his disowned son was capable of achieving. The $500,000 changed everything. Within 2 weeks, I had hired back my former employees and brought in 3 new developers. I moved FinanceFlow to a proper office space in Austin's tech district and invested heavily in user acquisition and marketing. But more than the money, it was the psychological freedom that transformed my approach to business. For the first time in my adult life, I was not worried about what my father thought. I was not trying to prove anything to him or earn his approval. I was building something because I believed in it, period. The results were extraordinary. Within 6 months, FinanceFlow had grown from 15,000 users to over 100,000. Our revenue increased by 400%, and we were finally profitable. The App Store featured us as App of the Week, and financial publications started writing about us as a serious player in the fintech space. The breakthrough moment came when Wall Street Journal reporter Amanda Chen reached out for an interview. Her article, titled "The Millennial Entrepreneur Disrupting Personal Finance," ran on the front page of the business section and included a photo of me in our Austin office standing in front of a wall covered with user testimonials. The article mentioned that I had self-funded the company's growth, describing me as a Harvard Business School graduate who chose the risky path of entrepreneurship over joining his family's established real estate business. Reading those words in print, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any approval my father had ever given me. The Wall Street Journal piece opened doors I never could have imagined. Within a week, I had calls from 12 different venture capital firms, including some of the most prestigious names in Silicon Valley. This time, I had leverage. I was not a desperate entrepreneur begging for money. I was a successful founder with options. The deal I eventually signed was with Redwood Partners for $5 million in Series A funding, valuing FinanceFlow at $25 million. The terms were far better than anything Marcus Goldman had offered, and I negotiated to maintain majority control of the company. 3 days after the Redwood deal was announced in TechCrunch, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected sender, Dad. I stared at his name on my screen for a long moment before opening the message. After months of silence following his disownment text, what could he possibly have to say? The message was short. I saw the news. I am proud of what you have built. I read it several times looking for sarcasm or some hidden meaning, but it seemed genuine. For just a moment, I felt that old familiar warmth, the son's instinctive happiness at receiving his father's approval. Then I realized something that surprised me. I did not need it anymore. Do not get me wrong. It felt good to know that he was finally proud of me. But his pride was no longer the driving force behind my decisions. I had learned to be proud of myself, to validate my own choices, to trust my own judgment, even when everyone else doubted me. My mother called later that day, crying again, but this time with happiness. He wants to talk to you, Randall. He knows he made a terrible mistake. That awful Thomas Whitfield admitted he made up that story about you planning to sue. Your father is devastated by what he did. I am glad he knows the truth, I said, and I meant it. But Mom, I am not the same person who left Greenwich 3 years ago. I do not need his forgiveness anymore because I have learned to forgive myself for not living up to his expectations. Over the following months, Dad and I slowly rebuilt some form of relationship, but it was different now. We talked about business as equals, not as father lecturing son. He asked thoughtful questions about FinanceFlow's growth strategy and even offered genuinely helpful advice about managing rapid expansion. The disownment was never officially reversed. Those legal papers remained filed with Richard Blackstone, but it no longer mattered to me. I had proven to myself that I could succeed without the Harrison family name, without the safety net of the family business, and without my father's approval. FinanceFlow continued to grow, and 18 months after the Redwood investment, we were acquired by a major financial services company for $120 million. I was 34 years old and financially set for life, but more importantly, I had learned something invaluable about independence and self-respect. That cold text from my father telling me he disowned me was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to stop seeking his approval and start believing in myself. It taught me that sometimes the people who love us most are also the ones who limit us most, not out of malice, but out of their own fears and expectations. I learned that growing up is not about meeting your parents' expectations. It is about having the courage to disappoint them in service of your own authentic path. Sometimes you have to lose your family's approval to find your own voice. And maybe that is exactly what growing up really means. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between following your dreams and keeping your family happy? Have you experienced that painful moment when someone you love becomes your biggest obstacle? Share your story in the comments below because I know many of you have walked this difficult path too. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family conflict and finding your own success. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to disappoint others while staying true to yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the most painful rejection becomes the greatest gift you never knew you needed. Until next time, keep believing in your own dreams, even when nobody else does.